Tell me if you've had this experience. Yesterday morning, I woke up and looked down at the sweatpants that I had slept in and worn the day before, and truly probably the day before that also. And I thought, maybe I should put on real pants. Then I thought, why bother? Nobody's going to see them anyway. We are 1 year into this pandemic, and one of the things that has changed, among many things that have changed, is how we dress. No more getting dressed up to go out for the evening. No more dress to impress. Your shoes don't matter at all. I mean, people can't even tell if you're wearing pants most of the time. Come on, be honest. How many of you have participated in some meeting or work-related event, some important event, while wearing sweatpants or pajamas or shorts? We've all done it. It's funny to think about, but it also tells us something important, which relates to this week's Torah portion. What it tells us is that clothing is about values. Our clothes tell us something about what matters to us. And clearly, during COVID, what you wear on the bottom half of your body doesn't matter very much. In general, though, the clothing that we wear tells us something about what's going on. For example, a graduation cap and gown tells us that there's some accomplishment being celebrated. Or a uniform tells us that somebody has a particular role to play. That'll become important, by the way, in this week's Torah portion. We'll talk about it in a moment. This is true from a Jewish perspective also. And here, let me remind you that we're recording this podcast in both audio and video. You can watch it if you want, and you don't have to, but this week I do have some visual aids to share in thinking about the role of clothing in Judaism. So, for example, the kippah. What does it mean? What does it tell us? Well, it's a symbol of humility and respect. When you wear it, it can remind you to act in a certain way. Or this, the talit, the prayer shawl. We'll talk about this more in a later podcast, but these fringes are really a symbol of the commandments, of the Jewish way of life. Wearing this is a statement of commitment, like saying, I am taking Judaism on my shoulders. So it turns out that clothing is more than clothing. Clothing is a symbol. Clothing is a reminder. It tells us who somebody is. It tells us what we value. It reminds us of some of our inherent values. All of which brings me to this week's Torah portion, which is about clothing, and specifically the clothing of the ancient priests. It's called Tetzaveh, and it describes the way that the priests were dressed in ancient times. It says, V'ata hakrev elecha et Aaron achicha ve'et banav. You, Moses, God talking to Moses, says, you shall bring forward your brother Aaron, who is to be the high priest, along with his sons to serve as priests. Ve'asita bigdei kodesh, and you shall make sacred clothing, sacred vestments for them. Specifically, they are to wear 6 different things: a breastpiece, something called an ephod, which is some kind of vest, a robe, a fringed tunic, a headdress or crown, and a sash. Now, it all looked a little something like this. For those who are looking, I'm sure there's some more high-tech way to show you this picture, but this is what I've got for right now. Now, this all feels so foreign, at least to me, from my Judaism. As a rabbi, I do not dress like that. I'm not looking to dress like that. And I'm not really looking for my spiritual leader to have this kind of very stylized way of dressing. So what are we supposed to do with this? Well, remember, clothing is about values. Like the cap and gown, like the talit, clothing reminds us that something important is going on, that this person has an important role to play. In this case, performing sacrifice and worship on behalf of the people. That's what priests did, bringing God's presence into the world. And even though we don't have priests anymore in the same way, we do still have a need for that role to be played. We still need a way to worship. We still need a way to connect spiritually, to feel God's presence in whatever way we think about God. We don't do that through priesthood anymore. Instead, we do it through study and prayer or meditation and community. That's our Judaism. That's the shift that we've undergone in the last 2,000 years. So, sometime in the last 2,000 years, the Jewish community did something brilliant. We took the priest's clothing, there he is again, and we placed it onto the item, which is the primary vehicle for Jewish life today. And that, of course, is the Torah scroll. So for those of you who can't see, I'm now opening the ark and removing the Torah scroll. And you can see that this scroll is wearing a breastpiece and a beautiful tunic, and if you look back, a headdress or crown, and a sash. In other words, the Torah is dressed like an ancient priest. And that's not an accident. The message is that this is our route to spiritual life, not sacrifice, not the line of Aaron, not the ancient temple, but rather study and prayer and community. And that means something important for each of us. It means that there's been a shift. There's no one to do it for you. There's no priest to sacrifice for you. That means that you have the power and the responsibility to build your own spiritual life. Nobody's going to sacrifice an animal in a temple in Jerusalem and declare you atoned for. You get to forge your own path, again, through learning, through ritual, through community and relationships. And your path might be very different from mine and vice versa, which is why our ways of observing Judaism can look different from each other, but still be grounded in Torah. One more thought. It's comforting to me to watch Judaism evolve from priesthood to Torah, because it means that we've always had the capacity to evolve, to change, to handle the unexpected and come out stronger on the other side. We are 1 year into a pandemic that has upended our lives. But this Parashah is a reminder that we have the strength to cope with what life throws our way. And not only to cope, but to thrive. If ancient Jews, after the temple was destroyed, could take the clothing of the priest and put it onto a Torah scroll, then we can also figure out how to maintain communities and relationships and spiritual connections during these really isolating times. In fact, not only can we figure it out, but we are figuring out how to do that. And I think that as hard as this has been, that we are better for it. So I hope that this week can be one of learning and wonderment, a time to look around us and appreciate all the wonderful things and people and experiences that this world has to offer, a time to realize that there's goodness here, even in these difficult times. And if you really want, you can even put on pants. Have a great week, everyone. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to 7-Minute Torah. If you enjoyed this program, please leave a review or a comment, and please pass it on to a friend. You can also subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great week.